Wiltshire, November, 1816. The invitation had not been her idea, which was the first thing Thessaly Renwick wanted understood, and the second thing was that she had very nearly declined it. Lady Hargrove had written to her father in October with the kind of letter that arrived on heavy paper and smelled faintly of lavender and expectation, requesting the attendance of Miss Renwick at a private gathering at Thornfield House on the 9th of November, at which the Duke of Thornfield would be hosting a small number of distinguished guests for an evening of music and conversation. The letter mentioned, with the careful indirectness of a woman who had spent 4 decades saying what she meant without technically saying it, that the Duke was known to appreciate accomplished pianists, and that Miss Renwick's reputation as a musician of exceptional ability had reached Wiltshire through channels Lady Hargrove preferred not to name, but which she assured Mr. Renwick were entirely credible. Matthias Renwick read the letter at his desk in the Birmingham house on a Tuesday morning, and set it down with the expression of a man who had built a textile fortune from nothing and understood precisely when he was being managed. He showed it to his daughter at breakfast without comment, in the way he showed her everything, with the complete confidence that she would read it more carefully than he had and arrive at the correct conclusion faster. Thessaly read it twice. She noted the weight of the paper. She noted the phrasing, gracious and specific, and leaving almost no room for refusal without discourtesy. She noted the word accomplished, which in certain mouths meant talented, and in others meant decorative, and she had spent enough years in enough drawing rooms to know which meaning Lady Hargrove intended, and which meaning the Duke of Thornfield was likely to apply. She knew the Duke by reputation, as most of the country did. William Ashworth, the 6th Duke of Thornfield, 34. Widowed 2 years, a man whose first marriage had been the subject of considerable discussion in circles that discussed such things, which was to say, in every circle that mattered, and several that did not. The details varied depending on who was telling them and how much wine had been involved, but the architecture of the story was consistent. A brilliant match, a beautiful wife, a marriage that had looked, from the outside, like everything a duke's marriage should look like, and had been, from the inside, something else entirely. Thessaly did not know the details of the something else. She did not need to. She had learned, in 24 years of observing people carefully, that the space between a public reputation and a private truth was where most of the important information lived, and she was not in the habit of filling that space with other people's speculation. What she did know was this: she was being asked to perform, not to attend, not to participate, not to sit among the guests as an equal and enjoy the evening's music alongside them. She was being asked to provide the music, to sit at the Duke of Thornfield's piano and play a waltz for the Duke of Thornfield's guests in the Duke of Thornfield's ballroom, and to do it beautifully, and to be thanked for it, and to understand that the thanking was the point. Her father, who had been watching her read the letter with the patience of a man who had learned long ago that his daughter's silences were more productive than most people's speeches, said, "Well?" "She wants me to play for him," Thessaly said. "At him, more precisely. She is presenting me as a feature of the evening." "You are a remarkable pianist," her father said. "I am a remarkable many things," she said. "She has chosen the one that can be displayed in a ballroom without disturbing the seating arrangement." Her father was quiet for a moment. "You could decline." She looked at the letter again. She thought about Thornfield House, which she had never seen, but had heard described with the particular reverence that Wiltshire reserved for its finest estates. She thought about a duke who appreciated accomplished pianists, and what that appreciation looked like from the piano bench. She thought about what it would mean to walk into that room and sit at that instrument and be, for the duration of a waltz, exactly what they expected her to be. And then she thought about what it would mean to walk into that room and be something else entirely. "I will accept," she said. Her father looked at her with the attention of a man who had watched this particular expression on this particular face many times before, and had learned that it preceded decisions that were always interesting and occasionally magnificent. "Thessaly," he said. "It is a waltz, father," she said. "What possible trouble could come of a waltz?" He said nothing further, because he had spent a lifetime paying close attention, and he knew precisely how much trouble could come of it. Thornfield House was larger than she had expected, and more beautiful than she had been prepared for. She arrived on the afternoon of the 9th with her father, and the dress she had chosen, midnight blue, not dark enough to disappear, and not bright enough to announce, the kind of dress that said, "I understand this room, and I have chosen not to compete with it." She also brought her own sheet music, because the invitation had assumed the Duke's collection would be sufficient, and Thessaly did not operate on other people's assumptions about what was sufficient. Lady Hargrove met them in the entrance hall, with the energy of a woman who had been waiting for this particular arrival, with a patience that had cost her something. She was 56, silver-haired, direct in a way that Thessaly recognized as genuine rather than performative, and she looked at Thessaly with the rapid, thorough assessment of someone evaluating not a guest, but a theory. "Miss Renwick. Mr. Renwick, you are very welcome at Thornfield. The piano has been tuned this morning. My nephew is particular about the instrument." "As am I," Thessaly said. The gathering was small, 20 guests. The ballroom at Thornfield had the quality that mattered more than size, which was proportion. The ceiling was high enough to carry sound without swallowing it, and the windows along the west wall let in the last of the November light in long amber panels that fell across the floor like something laid down on purpose. The piano was a Broadwood grand. She saw it from the doorway and knew two things immediately. First, that it was a very fine instrument, maintained by someone who understood what a piano needed and had provided it without compromise. And second, that it had been positioned at the far end of the ballroom, angled so that the pianist faced the wall and the guests occupied the room behind her. Whoever played was heard and not seen, present and not included, a voice without a face. She noted this arrangement and understood it completely. The Duke appeared at 7:30. He entered through the south doors with the unhurried certainty of a man arriving in a room he owned on an evening he had authorized. He was taller than she had expected. His features had the angular composure of a man who had arranged his face into a position some years ago and had not found sufficient reason to rearrange it. He moved through the room, greeting his guests with a warmth that was precisely calibrated, generous enough to be felt, controlled enough to mean nothing. He reached her last. Whether this was deliberate or incidental she could not determine, but she suspected deliberate, because nothing about the way he had moved through the room suggested a man who left sequences to chance. "Miss Renwick," he said. "Your Grace," she said. He looked at her with the complete, unhurried attention of a man conducting an evaluation he had already half finished before entering the room, and she held the look with the composure of a woman who had been evaluated in Birmingham drawing rooms and London concert halls and had developed the practice of letting people finish their assessments before she dismantled them. "Lady Hargrove tells me you are an exceptional pianist," he said. "Lady Hargrove is generous and accurate," she said. Something moved at the corner of his mouth, not a smile, an acknowledgement that she had said something he had not expected, filed and set aside for later processing. "The Broadwood is at your disposal," he said. "The guests will expect a waltz after dinner, something appropriate to the evening. I trust your judgment on the selection." "And if my judgment selects something unexpected?" she said. The assessment shifted, just slightly, from the automatic to the attentive. "I have found," he said, with the measured care of a man choosing words the way other men chose investments, "that unexpected things in a ballroom are rarely an improvement." She understood what he had said, and she understood what he had meant beneath it, and they were not the same thing. What he had said was about music. What he had meant was about control, about a room that operated within understood parameters, about a man who had learned, at some cost she could see in the architecture of his composure, that surprises in beautiful rooms were things to be managed rather than welcomed. "You shall have your waltz, your grace," she said. Dinner was served at 8. She was seated in the middle of the table, correct for her station and invisible from both ends, and she was aware throughout the meal that the Duke at the head of the table did not look at her once, because she was not, in his accounting of the evening, a guest. She was a provision. After dinner, the guests arranged themselves in the ballroom. Thessaly walked to the Broadwood with the unhurried composure of a woman who had performed in rooms far more demanding than this one, and had learned that the walk to the instrument was the first note of any performance. She sat. She adjusted the bench, which did not need adjusting, but the gesture gave the room a moment to settle, and gave her a moment to decide. She looked at the keys. She looked at the wall she had been positioned to face, and then she turned the bench. She turned it 40 degrees so that she faced the room instead of the wall, and the small mechanical sound of the bench legs on the ballroom floor was the loudest thing in Thornfield House for precisely 2 seconds. 20 guests looked at her. Lady Hargrove, in the second row, went very still. The Duke, standing near the south doors with a glass of port, watched her with the expression of a man seeing something depart from his expectations and not yet knowing whether to intervene. She played the waltz. But it was not the waltz they were expecting. She played a waltz she had composed herself, a piece she had written in the Birmingham house over the course of a winter, a waltz that began where waltzes began, in 3/4 time, in the mannered elegance the form required, and then moved somewhere else entirely. It moved into something that had weight and complexity, and the particular quality of music that is not decorating a room, but is instead telling the truth about what it feels like to be in one. It was technically demanding. It was emotionally unguarded. She played for 7 minutes. When she finished, she lifted her hands from the keys and looked at the room she had turned to face. The silence lasted 4 seconds. Then the applause began, and it was not the polite applause of a drawing-room entertainment. It was the startled, slightly overwhelmed applause of people who had expected a pleasant waltz and had received something they were going to discuss in their carriages on the way home. She looked across the room at the Duke. He was not applauding. He was standing exactly where he had been standing, with the port glass held at exactly the same angle, and he was looking at her with an expression she had not seen when he greeted her. Not the assessment, not the calibrated courtesy, but something stripped back and unmanaged, the expression of a man who had asked for a waltz and had been given something he did not know how to file. She held his gaze for 1 beat, 2. Then she stood from the bench, and she did not bow the way a performer bows, small and grateful and finished. She closed the lid of the Broadwood with a quiet, deliberate care, the way one closes a conversation one has finished on one's own terms. She looked at him once more, and the look said everything the waltz had said, compressed into a single second. "I see what you expected. I chose differently. I am not your provision." Then she walked away from the piano, collected her father from his chair, and was in the guest quarters before Lady Hargrove had fully processed what had happened to her carefully planned evening. Her father was quiet until they reached the corridor. "Well," he said. "He wanted a waltz," she said. "He received one." "You played the winter piece," her father said. "It was appropriate to the evening." "Thessaly, you turned the bench." "The acoustics were better facing the room," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "The acoustics," he said, in the voice of a man who was not fooled. "Good night, Father." He watched her walk to her room and said nothing further, because he understood that what had happened in the ballroom was not about acoustics, and was not about a waltz, and was about something his daughter had decided. And when his daughter decided things, the correct response was patience and proximity and a reliable solicitor. They left Thornfield House the following morning. Lady Hargrove appeared at breakfast with the expression of a woman recalculating, not displeased, but deeply engaged with a situation that had developed beyond her original projections. "My nephew was impressed," Lady Hargrove said, pouring tea with the practiced hand of a woman who used tea the way generals use terrain. "Your nephew wanted a waltz," Thessaly said. "I provided one." "You provided considerably more than one. He did not sleep well. I heard him in the music room at 2 in the morning. He does not go to the music room. He has not gone to the music room in 2 years. Thessaly held her teacup and said nothing, and the nothing was the most deliberate silence she had produced since the 4 seconds before the applause. "The piano lid," Lady Hargrove said. "You closed it when you finished." "It protects the instrument," Thessaly said. "It does. It also says something very specific when done in front of a room full of people who have just heard something they were not expecting." She set down the teapot. My nephew understood the gesture. I watched him understand it. "Lady Hargrove, I was invited to play a waltz. I played a waltz. The evening is concluded." "The evening," Lady Hargrove said, with the serenity of a woman who knew the difference between what was concluded and what was beginning, "is very much not concluded. But I expect you know that." They were in the carriage by 10, and the Wiltshire countryside moved past the windows in the gray November way of a county that kept its beauty understated and its opinions private. Her father read his correspondence. Thessaly looked at the road and thought about a Broadwood Grand angled toward a wall, and a man who had not applauded, and the expression on his face that had been the opposite of applause and considerably more honest. "The music room," her father said, not looking up from his letters. "At 2 in the morning. Lady Hargrove talks too much. Lady Hargrove talks exactly as much as she intends to, which is the thing that makes her interesting." They were quiet for the next mile. Then her father said, "What will you do?" She had been thinking about this since the corridor last night, and the answer had arrived some time before dawn, fully formed, with the clarity she associated with her best compositions. "The Ashworth Concert Hall," she said, "in Marlborough, the one attached to the assembly rooms." Her father set down his letters. "It has been closed for 3 seasons. The previous leaseholder let it decline. The instrument is a Clementi, adequate but not exceptional. The hall itself is sound, good proportions, excellent acoustics, and the location is central to the county. It is 8 miles from Thornfield." Her father looked at her. "The lease is available. I made inquiries last month before the invitation. The terms are favorable." "Before the invitation," her father said. "The hall interested me independently. I have been considering a venue for public concerts in Wiltshire. The county has no serious musical establishment, and the demand exists. It is a sound venture." 8 miles from Thornfield. "The location is central to the county. The proximity to any particular estate is coincidental." Thessaly. "It is a business decision, father." He looked at her with the thoroughness of a man who possessed a comprehensive understanding of what her business decisions looked like. "You are going to take a lease on a concert hall 8 miles from the home of a duke who could not sleep after hearing you play, and you are going to tell me it is about the acoustics." "The acoustics," she said, "are exceptional." He returned to his letters. She looked out the window and thought about a man who had stood in his own ballroom and watched her close the lid of his piano with an expression that had nothing managed in it. She thought about a music room visited at 2 in the morning by a man who had not entered it in 2 years, in a house full of ghosts she could feel but not yet. Name. She almost believed that the acoustics were the reason. The lease was signed before the month was out, because Thessaly Renwick had her father's solicitors and her father's capital, and the focused determination of a woman who had decided something and considered delay a form of dishonesty. Word reached Thornfield House through Lady Hargrove, who mentioned it to her nephew at dinner on a Wednesday evening with the calibrated indifference of a woman delivering information she considered extremely significant. "The Ashworth Concert Hall," the Duke said. He set down his knife. "Miss Renwick has taken the lease. So I'm told. She intends to restore it. Public concerts. A subscription series, I believe." The Duke looked at the candles on the table. He looked at nothing in particular for a moment that lasted slightly longer than nothing in particular required. 8 miles, he said. "I believe the location was chosen for its central position in the county," Lady Hargrove said, with a composure that cost her something to maintain. "Its central position," the Duke said. "The acoustics, I am told, are exceptional." He resumed his dinner. He did not mention the concert hall again that evening, but Lady Hargrove noted that he looked at the south window twice before the meal was finished, and that the south window faced the Marlborough Road, and the Marlborough Road led to the Ashworth Concert Hall, and she said nothing about any of this because she understood that some things required patience rather than commentary, and she had a great deal of both. The Ashworth Concert Hall stood at the east end of Marlborough's assembly rooms, a Georgian structure with tall windows and a vaulted ceiling, designed by someone who understood what sound needed from a room and had provided it without apology. The exterior was limestone, streaked with 3 winters of neglect. The interior was dust and potential. Thessaly arrived on the 1st of December with a builder from Bath, a piano tuner from London, and the focused energy of a woman taking possession of something she intended to make significant. She had spent the 2 weeks since signing the lease drawing plans, reviewing accounts, and corresponding with musicians in London and Bristol about a subscription concert series that would begin in February, which was ambitious and deliberate, because February in Wiltshire was the dead center of winter, when the county was starved for anything that was not another dinner party with the same 30 people discussing the same 12 topics, and she intended to provide an alternative. The builder assessed the structure and pronounced it sound, but neglected. The roof needed attention in 2 places. The seating required replacement. The stage floor had warped near the north wall, where a window seal had failed, and the damp had done what damp always did. When left alone with wood for 3 years, she had a schedule drawn by Thursday and a revised budget by Friday, and by the following Monday, she was in the hall at 7 in the morning, supervising the roof repair with the methodical attention of a woman who understood that the difference between ambition and accomplishment was a detailed schedule and the willingness to be present at 7 in the morning in December. The Clementi piano was the central problem. It was a good instrument that had been treated as furniture for 3 years, its action sluggish, its tone flat in the upper register. The tuner worked on it for 2 days and then told her, with diplomatic honesty, that it could be restored to adequate condition but would not achieve the standard her concert series required. "It needs replacing," she said. "It needs a Broadwood," he said. She thought about a Broadwood grand in a ballroom at Thornfield House, angled toward a wall. She thought about the tone of that instrument, the depth and clarity she had felt through her fingers for 7 minutes on a November evening. "Source 1, she said. "The best available. I will cover the cost." He came to the hall on a Wednesday in the 2nd week of December. She was on the stage examining the warped floor with the builder when the door at the back of the hall opened, and the Duke of Thornfield came through it, and she knew he was there before she saw him because the builder stopped talking and straightened. In the way people straightened when a title entered a room, she did not straighten. She finished her sentence about the subfloor moisture, and then she turned, and he was standing in the center aisle in a coat that was practical rather than fashionable, looking at the hall with the expression that catalogued everything and revealed nothing. "Your Grace," she said from the stage, "Miss Renwick." He looked at the ceiling, the windows, the space where the piano would go. "Lady Hargrove mentioned the restoration. I was in Marlborough on estate business, and thought I would see it for myself." "You were in Marlborough," she said. "Estate business," he said. The empty hall held the December silence between them with the acoustic honesty of a room designed to carry every sound, including the sound of two people deciding how long to maintain a pretense and arriving at different conclusions. "Would you like to see the plans?" she said. She came down from the stage and spread the architectural drawings across the front row of seats, and they stood side by side, looking at her plans, with the focused attention of two people examining something they were both interested in, and only one of them was admitting to. She showed him the acoustic modifications, the ceiling panels that would improve the sound diffusion, the stage extension that would accommodate a chamber ensemble, the ventilation changes that would manage the temperature without compromising the resonance. He asked 3 questions. The first was about the ceiling panels, and it confirmed he understood acoustics. The second was about the subscription model, and it confirmed he understood economics. The third was about the piano. "The Clementi," he said, "being replaced. A Broadwood is being sourced from London." Something moved in his expression, subtle and quickly managed. But she saw it, because she had been trained by a lifetime of performance to read audiences, and he was the most interesting audience she had encountered. "A Broadwood," he said. "It is the superior instrument for a hall of this size." He looked at the stage, at the space where the piano would stand. "You have positioned it facing the audience." "The pianist is part of the performance," she said, "not separate from it." He held her gaze. The hall, empty and cold and full of dust and December light, held them both. "The February concert. Will you play?" "I will open the series myself. It seemed appropriate, given the investment." "And will you play?" he said, with a precision that told her he was asking about something specific. "The piece you played at Thornfield?" She thought about the waltz, her waltz, the one she had composed in a Birmingham winter, and played in his ballroom, and closed the piano lid on. She thought about what it would mean to play it again, in her own hall, on her own instrument, facing the room. That piece was composed for a particular occasion. It does not repeat. Something shifted in his expression. Not disappointment, recognition, the kind a man showed when a position he had tested came back stronger than he had expected. "Then I shall have to attend," he said, "to hear what replaces it." He left the hall with the unhurried certainty of a man who had accomplished what he came for, and was not going to explain what that was. Thessaly stood in the center aisle and thought about a man who had come to Marlborough on estate business that she suspected very strongly did not exist, and who had asked whether she would play the waltz, and had received her refusal with an expression that looked, against all her expectations, like respect. January brought the concert hall closer to completion, and the county closer to curiosity. Wiltshire in winter was a closed system, the same families cycling through the same houses with the accumulated social energy of people who had perfected the art of finding new things to discuss about unchanging circumstances. Thessaly Renwick and her concert hall had given them something genuinely new, and the county had responded with the mixture of enthusiasm, skepticism, and intense observation that it brought to any development that threatened to be interesting. The subscription series sold well. Thessaly had priced it carefully, high enough to signal quality and low enough to signal accessibility. Lady Hargrove subscribed on the first day, which was a declaration. Sir Edmund Oakley, the county's most reliable social presence, subscribed on the second, which was a confirmation. The Duke of Thornfield had not subscribed, which was noted by everyone and discussed by most. Thessaly noted it. She set it aside. She had a concert series to prepare and a Broadwood being delivered from London on the 15th of January, and she was not going to organize her attention around the subscription decisions of a man who had come to her hall on fictional estate business and asked about a waltz. The Broadwood arrived on a Tuesday morning in a crate that required 4 men and considerable care. The instrument was magnificent. She knew it the moment the lid was raised, the way a horseman knew a horse or a builder knew stone, the immediate recognition of quality that preceded any technical confirmation. She sat at it that afternoon, alone in the empty hall, and played for 2 hours, listening to the way the hall received each piece, how the sound moved through the vaulted ceiling and returned, how the room and the instrument were learning each other. She did not play the waltz. She had told the Duke it did not repeat, and she had meant it. The neighborhood dinners continued through January. She had been received into Wiltshire society with the cautious warmth of a county that was not yet sure what to make of her. She was wealthy enough to be relevant. She was not titled enough to be assumed. She was, several people had noted independently, extraordinarily talented, which in Wiltshire society was either an asset or a complication depending on how visibly the talent was exercised. She and the Duke were at the same dinner twice. The first was at Oakley House, where they exchanged one remark about the concert hall restoration, which was overheard by Mrs. Oakley and became the primary topic of conversation for the remainder of the evening. The second was at Hargrove House, which Lady Hargrove had arranged with the transparent purpose of a woman who intended to observe effects at close range. At the Hargrove dinner, they talked about the subscription series, and then about the county road improvements, and then about a book on musical theory she had mentioned, and he had, to her surprise, read. That was the first time he had revealed knowledge that connected to her world rather than his. "You have read Czerny," she said. "I have read a great deal," he said, "in the last 2 years." The pause after 2 years carried weight. She did not ask him to explain, because she understood what had happened 2 years ago, and she understood that a man who had begun reading musical theory after his wife's death was telling her, without telling her, why. "Czerny is thorough," she said. "Czerny is relentless. He writes about music the way an engineer writes about bridges. Every structure visible, every load accounted for." "You prefer your music with visible structure?" He looked at her across the table. "I prefer to understand what I am hearing. I have found that beauty without structure is a temporary experience." She held his gaze. "Structure without beauty is not music at all. It is mathematics with ambition." Something happened at the corner of his mouth, not the almost smile she had seen at Thornfield. Something less controlled, a reaction that arrived before his composure could intercept it. Lady Hargrove, at the head of the table, watched this exchange with quiet satisfaction. After dinner, Lady Hargrove appeared at Thessaly's side. "He has not attended a concert in 2 years," Lady Hargrove said, without preamble. "He has not listened to music performed publicly. He has not entered a music room, except once, at 2 in the morning, after hearing you play." Thessaly looked at her gloves. "His wife," Lady Hargrove said, and then paused, because even she paused before this subject. Cecily was a pianist. She was gifted and charming, and she played beautifully, and the entire county adored her, and she used every room she ever entered, including the music room, including the marriage, as a stage for a performance that had nothing underneath it. Thessaly was quiet. He loved her completely and without adequate information. And when the information arrived, it arrived all at once, and it was comprehensive, and he has not listened to music since. "Until November," Thessaly said. "Until November," Lady Hargrove agreed. When a woman he had asked to perform a simple waltz turned the bench and played something that was the opposite of performance. Something entirely real. She paused. He recognized the difference. I watched him recognize it. Thessaly looked across the room at the Duke, who was in conversation with Sir Edmund, and was not looking at her, in the way that she had learned, meant he was entirely aware of where she was. "Lady Hargrove," she said carefully, "I leased a concert hall as a business venture." "Of course you did," Lady Hargrove said, with the serenity of a woman who had heard the same thing in different variations and had long since formed her own conclusion. "Good evening, Miss Renwick." February arrived with the particular intensity of a month that contained something the county was waiting for. The concert hall was finished. The Broadwood was tuned. The program was set. Thessaly had spent the final week of January in rehearsal, working through the new composition she had written for the opening night, a piece that was not the Thornfield Waltz, but was in conversation with it, the way a letter responds to a letter, acknowledging what came before while moving deliberately forward. The opening concert was set for the 14th of February, which Thessaly had chosen because it was a Friday, and because the county calendar was clear, and because she wasn't, despite what anyone might suggest, thinking about the date's other associations. She had sold 180 of the 200 seats. The remaining 20 she had reserved for the evening itself, and she was not going to account for why she had done this, except to say that it was standard practice for any well-managed subscription series to hold seats for late decisions. The pre-concert reception was held at the Assembly Rooms on the evening of the 12th. It was Lady Hargrove's suggestion, delivered with the confident practicality of a woman who understood that the concert itself was a musical event, but the success of the concert was a social one, and social success in Wiltshire required a gathering at which the county could see itself being enthusiastic before committing to enthusiasm publicly. 40 people attended. Thessaly arrived in the midnight blue she had worn to Thornfield in November, because the dress worked, and because she was not a woman who abandoned effective strategies for the sake of novelty. The Duke was there. He arrived late and alone, and he entered the room with the unhurried authority of a man whose presence reorganized any space he occupied. He had not subscribed. He had not confirmed attendance at the opening. He was here at the reception, a position between absence and commitment, and she understood the position completely, because she had spent 2 months studying the way this man moved toward things he wanted without admitting he was moving. She did not approach him. She talked with the Oakleys about the program. She talked with 2 young women from Devizes who were studying voice and were vibrating with excitement about the series. She was aware, throughout all of it, that the Duke was watching her. Not visibly, but she had developed over the winter a working sense of where his attention was actually directed, and it was directed, with a frequency she was no longer pretending not to notice, toward her. Lord Chelworth arrived at her left elbow. She had met Chelworth twice before, at dinners in January, and had catalogued him with the efficiency she brought to all social assessments. He was 51, baronet, old Wiltshire family, the kind of man who had inherited a position and a set of opinions simultaneously, and had never found cause to distinguish between the two. He attached himself to the Duke's social orbit with the gravitational loyalty of a man who confused proximity to a title with possession of the qualities a title represented. He smiled frequently. The smiles had the quality of things rehearsed in a mirror and deployed without revision for 3 decades. "Miss Renwick," Chelworth said, with the tone of a man preparing to be charming in a way that required witnesses. 5 people stood within comfortable hearing distance. He had chosen his position with care. "The concert hall is looking splendid. Quite the undertaking for a single season." "Thank you," she said. "The restoration has been extensive." "Extensive indeed." His smile traveled to the people within hearing range. "One does wonder, of course, whether Wiltshire is quite ready for a permanent musical establishment. We are a county of rather settled tastes, you understand. Settled traditions. One hopes that a more ambitious program will find the audience it requires, rather than the audience it imports. The word imports did the work he had designed it to do. In his mouth, with his audience, and his carefully positioned smile, it meant, "You are from Birmingham. You are trade money in landed Wiltshire. Your concert hall is an overreach, and everyone in this room knows it." She held his gaze with the composure of a woman who had heard this particular species of condescension in Birmingham boardrooms and London concert halls, delivered by men who had mistaken the accident of their birth for evidence of their quality. She had a comprehensive response prepared. She was formulating that response when she felt a shift in the room's attention, subtle but unmistakable. She felt him arrive at her right side before she heard him speak, the way she felt a change in a hall's acoustics before she identified its source. Chelworth saw the Duke's arrival, and his smile underwent a rapid and visible adjustment. The room waited. "The Ashworth Concert Hall," the Duke said, in a voice Thessaly had not heard before. Not the Thornfield voice, not the dinner party voice, not the measured tone he used when discussing road improvements with Sir Edmund. This was the voice underneath all of them, the one that carried 2 centuries of Wiltshire in it, and knew precisely what that weight could do when applied to a room. He did not raise it. He did not need to. "Has been restored to a standard that surpasses its original construction," he continued, looking at Chelworth with the complete, unhurried attention that Thessaly recognized from the Thornfield ballroom, except this time directed at a man who was rapidly discovering what it felt like to be on the receiving end of it. "The acoustic modifications alone represent an investment in the county's cultural life that Wiltshire has not seen in a generation. The subscription list includes most of the significant families in the county, which suggests that the audience Miss Renwick requires is not imported, but is, in fact, already here, and has been waiting for precisely this." He looked at Chelworth for one moment longer than was necessary. In any other man it would have been a stare. In a Duke it was a verdict. "I should think that we are all grateful when someone invests seriously in the life of the county. I know I am." The silence that followed lasted 3 seconds, long enough for Chelworth's smile to complete a journey from confident to uncertain to a careful, managed retreat. "Of course," Chelworth said. "I merely meant—" "Yes," the Duke said. The single word closed the conversation with the finality of a lid closing on a piano, and Thessaly, standing beside him, felt the echo of her own gesture return to her in a form she had not anticipated. Chelworth found someone else to speak with, quickly, with the haste of a man who needed distance from a correction he had not seen coming. The 5 people within hearing distance rearranged their attention with the fluency of people who understood they had witnessed something significant and were already composing the versions they would share in their carriages. She excused herself. She crossed the room to Lady Hargrove, who was standing near the window with a glass of wine and the expression of a woman watching a play reach exactly the scene she had been waiting for. "He intervened," Thessaly said. "He did not have to," Lady Hargrove said. "No. Chelworth will be careful for the rest of the season, possibly the rest of the decade." She sipped her wine. "He made it about the hall so that Chelworth had no ground to stand on. He made it about the county so that defending you did not require declaring anything. And he made it about the investment so the room understood his position without requiring him to expose it." She paused. "That is not merely a defense. That is architecture." Thessaly looked across the room at the Duke, who had resumed his circuit, and was talking to Sir Edmund about something that appeared to involve no emotional significance whatsoever. "He is not subscribed," Thessaly said. "He has not. But he is here." Lady Hargrove looked at her nephew. "He is deciding. He decides slowly, my nephew. He accumulates evidence. He requires more of it than most people before he will revise a position. She looked back at Thessaly. But he does revise. That is the thing worth knowing about him. When the evidence is sufficient, he revises completely. Thessaly looked across the room. The Duke looked back. Not the assessment. The other expression. The one that had been building since November. The one she had stopped pretending not to catalog. She held his gaze for one moment longer than the social register of a reception required, and then turned back to Lady Hargrove and said something about the program for opening night, and the reception continued around them, and neither of them said anything further to each other that evening. It cost them both more than either would have admitted. The following morning, a letter arrived at Thessaly's lodgings in Marlborough. It was in his hand, not a secretary's. It contained one line. "One subscription, please. The seat nearest the piano. Thornfield." She read it twice. She put it in the desk drawer where she kept her composition drafts, beside the sketches for the opening night piece. She noted that he had asked for the seat nearest the piano, which was the seat with the clearest view of the pianist's face, and she did not account for what this meant, because she was already late for a rehearsal and did not have time for things that could not be accounted for. She went to the hall and rehearsed for 3 hours and played better than she had played all winter, and did not connect the two things until she was walking home in the February dark. He came to the concert hall on the morning of the 13th of February, which was the day before the opening. Thessaly had spent enough months studying this man to know the timing was not coincidence. She was alone in the hall. The restoration was complete. Every surface clean, every seat in place, the broadwood tuned and waiting on the stage like a promise someone was about to be held to. She was sitting at the instrument, not playing, just sitting with her hands in her lap and looking at the empty hall and thinking about what the next evening would mean and whether she was ready for it, which she was, and whether she was ready for who would be in the audience, which was a different question. She heard the door. She knew it was him before the sound resolved into footsteps, because she had learned the rhythm of his arrival, the way a musician learned the rhythm of a piece, through repetition and attention, and the particular awareness that came from listening for something specific, even when you were pretending not to listen. He walked down the center aisle and stopped at the front row. He looked at the stage, and at the broadwood, and at her, sitting at it with no audience and no performance, and no reason to be anything other than exactly what she was. "It is extraordinary," he said, and the word had no social padding around it. He said it the way he said things when he meant them, plainly, once, without repetition. He stood in the aisle, and she sat at the piano, and the hall held them in its acoustics, the same acoustics that would hold 200 people tomorrow evening, holding just the two of them now with the same fidelity, because a well-designed hall did not care how many people were in it. It carried what was there. "I owe you an apology," he said. She waited, at Thornfield, in November. The piano facing the wall, the seating that placed you outside the gathering rather than within it. That was my instruction. Lady Hargrove arranged the invitation, but the terms of the evening were mine. She let him continue because she understood that a man apologizing without qualification needed space to complete the architecture of it. "I asked you to play a waltz. What I meant was that I wanted music in the room that I could control. That stayed where I put it. That did not—" He stopped. He looked at the windows. "That did not reach me." "Your wife," Thessaly said. He was quiet for a long moment. Cecily played beautifully, and she used the beauty of it. I spent 3 years listening to music I believed was honest and discovering, at considerable cost, that it was not, that it had never been. When she died, I closed the music room. I stopped attending concerts. I arranged every room so that music, if present at all, was furniture, something that could not reach me, because I had decided that the reaching was the thing that had cost me. He looked at her. And then you turned the bench. She held his gaze from the piano. You played something that was the opposite of everything I had been protecting myself against. It was the most honest thing I had heard in 3 years. And I went to the music room at 2 in the morning and sat at a piano I had not touched since Cecily died. And I understood that the policy I had built was not protecting me from dishonest music. It was protecting me from all music. And the cost was that I had stopped hearing anything true. The hall was very quiet. The February morning light lay across the seats and the stage and the two of them. I did not position the piano toward the wall because of you, he said. I positioned it because of me. But you were the one made to face it. And that was wrong. And I am sorry for it. She looked at the man standing in the aisle who had just dismantled the most protected part of himself with the precision of an engineer and the honesty of someone who had run out of reasons to be imprecise. I understood, she said. In the ballroom, the moment I saw the piano facing the wall, I understood what it meant. Not about me. About you. Is that why you turned the bench? I turned the bench because a pianist who faces a wall is agreeing to be invisible, and I do not agree to be invisible. But I played what I played because I understood that you needed to hear something real, and you had arranged the entire evening to prevent it, and I was not willing to let the arrangement stand. She paused. I did not play that waltz for the room. I played it for you, and when I closed the lid, it was the only honest ending I could find. It said, I have given you the truth, and the truth is finished, and I am not going to sit at your piano and wait for you to decide what to do with it. It was the most significant thing anyone has done in my presence in a decade, he said. I have conducted a thorough accounting of my situation since November, and the accounting has been very clear. What does it say? That I asked for a waltz and received an education. That I positioned a piano toward a wall, and a woman turned it toward the room and was right to do so. That I have spent 2 years protecting myself from music, and you have spent 2 months building a concert hall 8 miles from my house, and I am standing in it. He stepped to the edge of the stage. I told myself the subscription was about supporting a county institution. I told myself that for approximately 1 day before the pretense became unsustainable. I told myself the lease was about the acoustics, she said. How long did you believe it? About 3 weeks. I managed 1 day. You are considerably better at self-deception than I am. I'm better at most things than you are, she said. It is one of the qualities you are going to have to accommodate. Something broke open in his expression, a full, undefended reaction, the kind that arrived when a man stopped composing his face and let it respond to what was actually in front of him. He came up onto the stage. She stood from the bench, because this was not a conversation for sitting, and they were very close with the February morning light coming through the tall windows and 4 months of carefully maintained distances between them. I was wrong about you at Thornfield, he said. Before I met you, I decided what the evening would be before you arrived, and I was wrong about all of it. You were wrong about the piano facing the wall. You were not wrong about wanting to hear something real. You were just afraid of it. I'm not afraid of it now. He kissed her. It had the quality of something composed over months, every measure leading to this one. She kissed him back with the same precision she brought to every performance and every true thing she had ever committed to, and the Broadwood was beside them, and the empty hall was around them, and none of it required any further rehearsal. When they separated, she kept her hand on his arm. The opening concert is tomorrow evening. I am aware, the seat nearest the piano. You will hear a new composition. I wrote it for the hall. He looked at her. Not for me. I wrote it for the hall, but the hall was built for reasons that were not entirely architectural, and the composition was written for reasons that were not entirely musical, and I expect you will hear that." He covered her hand with his. "I expect I will." He proposed on the morning of the 14th of February, which was the morning of the opening concert, which was either the most inconvenient or the most deliberate timing of any proposal in Wiltshire's recent memory. Thessaly was at the hall at 7, adjusting the Broadwood's position by half an inch because the morning light had shifted since yesterday, and the angle mattered, when he arrived at the door. "I have a preliminary assessment," he said. She set down the cloth she had been using to polish the piano lid. "Go on." "You are the most formidable person I have met in 10 years of managing a very large estate and a very complicated county. You are going to be extremely difficult to be married to. Your opinions on piano placement border on the unreasonable, and I'm asking whether you will marry me with the full understanding that I am acquiring a duchess who will reorganize my entire household before the honeymoon is concluded." She looked at him from the stage of the concert hall she had built, in the morning light, on the day it was opening, with 200 seats behind him and the Broadwood beside her, and 4 months of distance closed to nothing. "That is a proposal delivered as an assessment," she said. "I find assessments more honest than declarations. You told me you preferred honesty." She came to the edge of the stage. "My preliminary assessment is that you are a man who positioned a piano toward a wall and spent 2 years avoiding music and read Czerny alone in a library because you were too stubborn to admit you missed the sound of something real. And you are going to find it considerably harder to maintain your policies when married to someone who composes waltzes and does not face walls. My policies have been performing catastrophically since November. They have been performing very badly. I would recommend a complete restructuring. I'm in the process of one." He looked at her. "Is that a yes?" "That is a yes delivered as a counter-assessment. I thought you would appreciate the format." He came up onto the stage and took her hand, and held it with the brief, firm grip of a man who meant what he agreed to. "Thessaly," he said, and her name in his voice in the empty hall carried the way a note carried in a room designed to hold everything that was true. "William," she said, and this time the name had everything in it that had been accumulating since November, and neither of them could put it back. Her father received the news at breakfast. He set down his correspondence and looked at her with the attention of a man who had watched his daughter lease a concert hall 8 miles from a duke's estate, and had understood precisely what she was doing, and had waited with patience for the outcome. "The Duke of Thornfield," he said, "the man who pointed your piano at a wall. He has revised that arrangement considerably." "Has he?" "He proposed this morning at the hall. He described it as a preliminary assessment. He said I was formidable and unreasonable about piano placement, and that he expected me to reorganize his household." Her father was quiet for a moment. "Is he good enough for you?" She thought about it with the honesty the question deserved. "He is trying to be," she said. "The effort is genuine, and the progress is considerable, and I find I cannot hold a man's November against him when his February is everything it should be." Her father nodded. "It is the best version of the answer," he agreed. The opening concert began at 7:30 on the evening of the 14th of February. 200 seats filled, the full county, the Oakleys in the 3rd row, Sir Edmund in the position of honor he had earned through 3 decades of being reliably present at every significant occasion in Wiltshire, Lady Hargrove in the 2nd row, center, with the expression of a woman who had been planning since October and was watching the results exceed her projections. Lord Chelworth was in the 5th row. He had subscribed in the final week of January, after the Duke's intervention at the reception, with the decision-making of a man who had concluded that attendance was safer than absence. He sat with his wife and maintained the expression of a man who was enjoying an evening he had no objections to. The Duke of Thornfield was in the first row, the seat nearest the piano. Thessaly walked to the Broadwood with the unhurried composure she had brought to every performance since she was old enough to understand that the walk was part of the music. She sat. She adjusted the bench. She looked at the keys. She looked at the room, 200 faces looking back, and in the first row, one face that was not the assessment or the managed courtesy, but the fully present one, the one that had nothing between it and her. She played the new composition. It was a piece that understood what a waltz could be when it was not decoration and not defiance, but invitation. A piece that opened a door and held it open and waited with patience and confidence for whoever was ready to walk through. When she finished, the silence lasted 3 seconds, and then the applause was the applause of a room that understood. It had heard something important and was responding with the full weight of its attention. She stood. She did not close the piano lid. She left it open, the keys visible, the instrument waiting, a gesture the room may not have consciously registered, but which one person in the first row understood completely. She looked at William. He was not applauding, as he had not applauded in November. He was looking at her with the expression she now knew was his version of complete happiness, shown quietly and without announcement, and she received it with the expression that was hers, the one she wore when she was not performing anything at all. Lady Hargrove, in the second row, looked at her nephew, and then at Thessaly, with the satisfaction of a woman watching something arrive at a quality that exceeded her most optimistic projections. Lord Chelworth congratulated her during the interval. He said the right things with the managed grace of a man operating within revised parameters, and she met his eyes with the composed directness that was her natural register, and nothing further was required. William appeared beside her after Chelworth moved on. His presence was the comment. "The lid," he said quietly. "I left it open. At Thornfield, you closed it. Tonight, you left it open." Closing it meant the conversation was finished on my terms. Leaving it open means the music is not finished. It continues. He held her gaze. "I find I prefer the open version." "I know," she said. "That is why I played it." They were married in April at the church in the village between the Thornfield estate and the Marlborough Road, which was geographically convenient and musically appropriate, as the church had an organ Thessaly had assessed in February and found to be a good instrument in need of better maintenance, which she had arranged by March because she was not a woman who attended a church with an out-of-tune organ and considered it someone else's problem. She wore midnight blue. William had not been surprised. Lady Hargrove had not been surprised. Her father had simply nodded when she told him, with the expression of a man receiving confirmation of something he had understood since she was old enough to choose her own clothes. The county turned out. 200 people from the concert hall and a considerable number beyond, because the marriage of a duke was an event, and the marriage of this duke to this woman was an event with the additional quality of a story the county had been following since November, with the invested attention of people who recognized a good composition when they heard one. Thessaly walked in on her father's arm and looked at William at the front of the church and thought about all the versions of the gesture. The first closing, in November. "I have given you the truth, and I am leaving." The second, the open lid at the February concert. The music continues. She had decided sometime in March that the third would not be a closing or an opening at all. She reached the front of the church. William looked at her with the full, unguarded expression that had nothing of November in it, nothing of the man who had angled a piano toward a wall and organized his grief into a policy about music. Just him, entirely present, looking at the woman who had turned the bench and built a concert hall and composed a waltz that had broken open a room he had sealed shut, and had chosen him in spite of, and because of, all of it. She did not close anything. She did not leave anything open. She took his hand. He held it with the steady grip of a man who meant what he committed to. The ceremony proceeded. The village heard. The county witnessed. And when it was done, they walked out of the church together into the April afternoon, and the Wiltshire countryside was doing what it did in April, which was to be so entirely itself that there was no room for anything that was not true. The wedding breakfast was at Thornfield House, because Thessaly had walked through the Thornfield dining room in March and had immediately identified 4 things she intended to change, which she had told William about on the walk back, and he had said, "Before or after the ceremony?" And she had said, "The sequence is negotiable, but the changes are not." And he had said, "I have noticed that very little about you is negotiable." And she had said, "My terms are not negotiable. They are correct." And that had been the moment she understood clearly that this was going to be the best decision she had ever made. Her father found her at the edge of the room in the late afternoon. He looked at her with the attention that had never in 24 years missed anything that mattered. "Well," he said. She looked at the room. She looked at William across it, managing the occasion with the practiced ease of a host who was doing it today, with a quality she had not seen at any previous gathering, a lightness that was small and real and unperformed. "He is happy," she said. "Are you?" "I am. I am also still annoyed about 2 things he said in January, and I intend to revisit them when the moment is right." "2 things?" "A remark about subscription pricing that was technically sound and entirely unnecessary, and an opinion about Cherney that I have not yet finished disagreeing with." Her father laughed. The full, genuine laugh of a man who had spent a lifetime being proud of this person and had chosen today to let it show completely. "You are going to be a magnificent duchess," he said. "I know," she said. "I have every intention of being exactly that." William found her in the Thornfield music room in the evening, as the light moved across the grounds in the long golden way of April evenings that did not want to end. She was standing at the Broadwood, the same instrument she had played in November, and she was looking at it with the expression she wore when she was deciding something. The piano still faced the wall. She had not asked him to move it. She had been waiting for something, though she had not told him what, and he had not asked because he had learned over 5 months that Thessaly's silences were compositions in progress, and interrupting them was both rude and inadvisable. "The piano," she said. "Yes," he said. "It still faces the wall." "It does." She looked at him. "I am going to turn it." "I know," he said, "not because the acoustics are better. I am going to turn it because a piano in a music room should face the person it is being played for. And I am going to play for you. In this room. The waltz I told you did not repeat." He stood in the doorway of the music room he had sealed for 2 years, and he watched the woman he had married place her hands on the instrument and turn it, physically, with the deliberate care of someone repositioning something that mattered. She sat. She looked at the keys. She looked at him. "I told you this piece did not repeat. That was true in November. It is not true anymore. The occasion has changed. I have changed it." She played the waltz, the same waltz, composed in a Birmingham winter, and played in this house for a room full of people who had expected something pleasant and received something true. She played it now in the music room, for an audience of 1, and it was the same piece, and it was entirely different, because the room was different, and the reason was different, and the woman playing it was not proving a point to a man who had underestimated her. She was playing for a man she had chosen, in a room she was reclaiming, on an evening that belonged to both of them. When she finished, she did not close the lid. She did not leave it open as a gesture. She simply took her hands from the keys and looked at him, and the music was in the room and in the space between them, and it did not need a gesture to complete it, because it was already complete. William crossed the room and stood beside the piano. He looked at her with the expression she now knew was entirely his, the one that had nothing of policy or protection in it, the one that was just him. "The waltz," he said. "It repeated," she said. "It did not repeat," he said. "It arrived somewhere new." She thought about November, and the bench she had turned, and the lid she had closed, and the morning she had walked away from this house. She thought about every version of the music between then and now. The refusal to repeat, the new composition, the open lid. And now this, the same waltz in a different room with a different meaning, played for the man standing beside the piano, who had organized his grief into silence and had spent 5 months letting a woman from Birmingham dismantle the silence one note at a time. "William," she said. "Thessaly," he said, and her name in his voice in the music room had all of November and December and every month since in it, and none of it was a wound anymore. He took her hand from where it rested on the piano keys. She let him take it. The April evening went on around them, unhurried and warm, and the Broadwood faced the room now, and the music room was open, and the waltz was in the air, and neither of them had any interest in determining whether any of it had been practical. The best investments, her father had always said, were the ones you understood better after you had made them. She understood this one completely.